Um, people are scared of church for the same reason that they're scared of helicopters. They don't want to get too close in case they get sucked into the rotas. Thought of Lila. Lila, that one was especially for you. No? So last week we were talking about the wheat and the weeds and the soil and the sower and all of that. This morning there's loads, feels like there's loads of content here. Honestly, I'm not sure whether this is the right way to go around about these parables, but there's quite a lot of parables, several parables of vines and fig trees, and so try to put them into one. They are worth a standalone, but I suppose my fear is that maybe by the time it comes to the next one next week, it's just repeating myself. But even reflecting on that as we were worshipping this morning, it's not always a bad thing to repeat, to continue to reflect maybe on the one parable, and maybe with your feedback that this morning, if people think that we need to maybe go one by one through these parables, maybe we should do that. But we're going to take a look at I think there's a few themes, there's a few standout themes that come through the vine and the fig tree parables mentioned throughout the Gospels. I suppose last week when we were talking about wheat and weeds and the soil, at that time, the people that Jesus was speaking to in Galilee, almost anybody might have been able to grow wheat. But then today's ones, the fruit trees, the vines, more often were grown by the wealthy. And so wealthy owners of vineyards show up a lot in these parables that we're going to reflect on this morning. So Matthew 7 is the first one. Verse 15. Watch out, this is Jesus speaking. It's actually coming near to the end of the Sermon on the Mount. That's the context. Watch out for false prophets, he says. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit, you will recognize them. Matthew 12. These are short enough verses, I think, that we could just read them together. Verse 33, make a tree good and its fruit will be good, or make a tree bad and its fruit will be bad, for a tree is recognized by its fruit. You brood of vipers, how can you who are evil say anything good? For out of the overflow of the heart the mouth speaks. The good man brings good things out of the good stored up in him, and the evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in him. And then verse 37, for by your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned. And then Luke 6, just a couple of verses in Luke 6, verse 43. No good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit. People do not pick figs from thorn bushes or grapes from briars. The good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart. The evil brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart, for out of the overflow of his heart the mouth speaks. So good and bad fruit are an important image in Jesus' teaching. And so it is similar. So those three passages that we've read, there's the same image of the good fruit and the bad fruit in these two Matthew passages that we've read, and one in Luke. Each time, and if we did have more time, we could be able to to look at it. I don't think it's overly necessary, but they are each time used to mean something slightly different. So Matthew, as I've said, the context is at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, when what Jesus is referring to, who he is referring to. He has no one specific in mind. He is generally speaking about beware of false prophets. And then Matthew 12 appears in the context of blaspheming of the Holy Spirit. And so the attention of this parable is veering us towards our words, focuses the attention on our words. I suppose, again, really quickly, the key difference between the images, particularly in Matthew, I guess, is that a bad plant with the right treatment can potentially become a good plant, but a thistle will always remain a thistle. As we might struggle with the implication of that is, and I think it is worth saying this, that this is not about the intrinsic worth of people. So maybe we could read that a thistle will always remain a thistle, and think that just is speaking about the intrinsic worth of people. I don't think that is true for this parable. It is certainly not true for the ways and the words and the ministry of Jesus or the heart of the gospel. But I think that these images are about understanding words and deeds. They are understanding what they do, what we do and say come out of who we are. And that's just why this is why, as we said the last couple of weeks, the parables are so provocative. This is really, even last week, some of the things that we shared last week continue to dig away at me, and the same this week. What we do and what we say come out of who we are. And I think these parables in particular, and maybe I'm making them too simple, I think there is more to it than this, but I think if we were to try and summarize them, try to summarize this idea of good fruit and bad fruit, it is the reminder of the importance of what we say and what we do. And so it's incredibly tempting at times. I do this all the time. I know that I've done it this week. I'm sure none of you have, but I become very tempted to dismiss thoughtless deeds as meaning nothing. Or I can be very tempted to dismiss some words, unhealthy words, as maybe not meaning anything. But I think what these parables are wanting to do is that actually they reveal what is in your heart. It reveals who we really are. And so because I want to get through a few more parables, I suppose my challenge, the question that I would love you to ask, and I know if you ask it honestly, it is going to provide an interesting conversation around the dinner table if you're willing to do this. But whenever you think of your words this week particularly, you can do your actions, but let's think about your words. If you were to reflect on your words this week, would people conclude that you are a fig or a thistle? Or that for good, fun, dinner time conversation? You reflect on your words, and if you're up for asking people around the table, would people conclude that you are a fig or a thistle? Has it produced good fruit, or has it produced not so good fruit? Because it reveals what's in your heart. It reveals who you really are. So if you're up for that, I think that is what Jesus is trying to provoke and disrupt in us. Sort of the next few parables around the fruitful fig tree. We're still in the theme of fig trees and vineyards. If you want to title this, which as you know, rubbish putting titles on these talks. But 24 verse 32. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. So whenever it uses this language of summer is near, it meaning it's harvest time. It's time to harvest. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. I tell you the truth, this is Jesus speaking, that this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Then again, Matthew 13, verse 28 to 31. Again, just short verses. Let's just read them. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. Again, pretty much just the same. As soon as its twigs get tender, its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. It's almost actually word for word in Mark's Gospel. And then Luke 21, verse 29 to 33. Look at the fig tree and all the trees. He told them this parable, verse 29 of Luke 21. When they sprout leaves, you can see for yourselves and know that summer is near. Even so, when you see these things happening, you know that the kingdom of God is near. I tell you the truth, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. And so I do think there's something like practical, there's something for us to consider here. But I just wanted to speak to these few verses for a moment around this idea of summer is near, around harvest time. And this generation will not pass, that Jesus says, before you see this harvest. And if we're asked the question in the room this morning, which harvest is being talked about here? Now, some will say that it is speaking of the end of times, when Jesus returns in all his glory, when the Son of Man will return. Others, me being one of them, regard the reference to the harvest as referring to the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. And so Jesus' prophecy came true within the time frame that he said it would. Jesus said the harvest, the summer is near, the harvest, and this generation, speaking to those in front of him, are not going to pass away until you see the harvest, until you see this judgment. Harvest is referring to judgment. And so AD 70, the temple fell, Jerusalem fell, the temple was destroyed. And so what Jesus prophesied had happened within the generation that Jesus referred to. But I don't necessarily want to get bogged down by that, because whatever interpretation we adopt, what Jesus is saying here, I think, is just a helpful reminder of how to live well in this world. It's a helpful reminder to live well in this world, but I think it is also a challenge, and it's maybe even an invitation, because there is certain events and actions that signal what will happen next. So probably the most obvious example, I think it's Matthew 18, where it says, like, look, when you look out to the sky, you know what's about to happen. Why can you not think that same way for knowing and understanding the sign of the times? You can look out to the sky and know what it's pointing to. Also look out to see what's going on around the world, to see events that are taking place, and also be able to know and look and understand the sign of the times. And so I think the invitation of the parables is that we live wisely in complex times. And it's maybe not everybody. I think it's why it's the gift of the prophet or the gift of the apostle to be able to look and to discern what is going on and be able to point and direct and help us get an understanding of what is going on in order for us to live well in this world, in order to live well in complex times. Luke chapter 13 gives us another parable, verses 6 to 9. Then he told this parable. A man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he went to look for fruit on it, but he did not find any. So he said to the man who took care of the vineyard, for 3 years now I've been coming to look for fruit on this fig tree, and I haven't found any. Cut it down. Why should it use up the soil? Sir, the man replied, leave it alone for 1 more year. I'll dig around it, I'll fertilize it, and if it bears fruit next year, fine. If not, then cut it down. And again, I was just drawn in by this parable. It could not help but be so reminiscent of when Jesus, towards the end of his life, he makes his way to the temple. In Mark chapter 11 or Mark chapter 21, you'll find this story where Jesus, approaching the temple, is looking looks on this tree for figs, but doesn't find any, and he curses it. Maybe feels a bit extreme, but I think Jesus is trying to teach us something even in that moment. So in Matthew and Mark, we have the fig tree. Jesus is in close proximity to the temple. He sees the fig tree, no figs on it. He curses it. He goes into the temple and cleanses it, and comes back out, and the fig tree has withered. That's a really short version of all that happened in that during that day in the life of Jesus. But I think the implication, I don't think it's a stretch to say that the implication is that just as the fig tree was not doing what fig trees do, the temple was not doing what the temple should do. And it was the deep frustration of Jesus. He sees something rile Jesus whenever he recognizes that the temple is not a house of prayer for all nations. It is not being a house of prayer for all nations. It is not done what the temple should do. And again, I think that is the temple did wither. The temple withers as the fig tree did in AD 70. But back to Luke 13. The fig tree, Luke's fig tree is different. It's not connected to the temple. Fig tree was a common symbol. So if we went back into the Old Testament, we could go to 2 Kings, we could go to Chronicles, Samuel, to see how the fig tree was a common symbol of peace. In fact, Micah 4 verse 4 has this beautiful line of sitting under the fig tree with no one disturbing because Yahweh has spoken. This was a common symbol of peace. The idea of the fig tree, the symbol of the fig tree. But at the same time you've got that, but you've also got the idea of an unproductive plant. Again, go back into the Old Testament. You could go to Isaiah. You could go back into Micah. And you'll see this. It is symbolic of unfaithful nations. The fig tree, the barren fig tree, is a symbol of unfaithful nations, unfaithful people. Micah says there's no cluster to eat. There's no fig that an appetite could fancy. The committed person has perished. There is none upright among the people. And so we go back again to this parable. I think one of the things we're being invited to question is why is there no fruit? Why is there no fruit? If we were to go back to the Old Testament again, to that book of Leviticus that everybody loves to get to in their reading plan, but in there, it was Jewish law. Jewish law was don't touch the fig tree. Leave it. Let it be for at least 5 years. That was the instruction. The gardener was probably following Jewish law, or he was maybe just a good gardener. He removed maybe some of the fruit in order to allow the tree to fully establish. And I think we don't necessarily have a lot of information in this chapter in Luke 13. But I think another one of the themes throughout loads of the parables that Jesus speaks about is an absentee landlord. And so here is somebody that is a rich man that owns a vineyard. He has plenty of money, plenty of whatever, and he has this vineyard. He keeps coming back for it because he's remote, he's distant, but he makes his way back every so often in order to receive his profits, in order to receive his spoils. And so he's completely ignorant to farming. He's completely ignorant to Jewish law. And I think there's a common feature in Jesus' story, which is why I think it's worth pointing it out. I think there's oftentimes we see the ruthlessness of landlords, of vineyard owners, of absentee land-owning vineyard owners. So what is this parable speaking to? What is the conversation that we can have from this parable? I think, again, I don't know how often you've heard this parable being spoke about, but I think the traditional interpretation may be that it presents God as the owner of the vineyard. It presents Jesus as the gardener and humanity as the unproductive fig tree. And I think on a surface level, that's probably how I would have engaged with this parable before. But I cannot for the life of me go to this parable and see that it is speaking of an absent, uncaring landlord. I cannot see that being representative of God. An absent, uncaring, it only cares about the profits from the land. See, the parable of the sower is, it has a one-to-one correlation of characters. And we talked about this right at the very beginning, that sometimes we see that in one parable and we try to apply that to every other parable. I think for here, there is not a one-to-one correlation to the characters in the same way there was to the parables that we spoke about last week, which makes what we're doing like challenging and fun and all of that. So what I want to suggest to you, what I've been wrestling with, is that the fig tree is the focus of the story. Because if it cannot be that God is being presented as an absent, remote, distant landlord that's only interested in what he can get out of his investment. So I think the fig tree is the focus of the story, and all exists to focus our attention on the change that is needed in the fig tree. For me, anyway, that is the challenge of this parable. That is the challenge that I felt from this parable. The focus is on the fig tree and the desperate change that is needed in order for the fig tree to be what it was created to be, to do what it was created to do. And there's change that's needed. It needs dug around. It needs tilled. The soil needs tilled. It needs dug up. It needs fertilizer. It needs real good care. And so whatever way we interpret it again, I know that people will interpret it differently than I have. Whatever way we interpret it, though, I think the theme seems to be the need for change to become in some way productive. And the beautiful thing is, this completely, I think, runs against the way of an absent remote landlord who's just desperate for his profits, is that we will be given time. We will be given time and we will be given the care that is needed in order for us to be fruitful, in order for us to produce what the Father is longing to produce in us. And I can't help but conclude with this. I don't know if you necessarily would class it as a parable, but John 15, I think in light of what I've shared there, I really felt like I just wanted to finish with John 15. And hopefully your version says the same as mine. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. I know there is some verses that say he is the vine dresser. But in some versions it almost uses the exact same language that is used to describe a tenant or one of these landowners, and don't think that's helpful, because the word that is used here is gardener or farmer. So he's the true vine, and my Father is the gardener, and he cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. And I think it's really important, especially in light of that previous parable, to recognize that Father is the gardener. He is not remote. He is not distant. He is a hands-on expert. He is completely unlike the remote, distant landlord. He tills the soil and he knows exactly what to do for the good of the plant. And I really feel like I need to hear that. I feel like I need to hear that. I think we all need to hear that. The Father knows exactly what to do for the good of the plant. The Father knows exactly what to do for your good. Cares. He's hands-on expert. He wants to get right into the muck, right into the mess. He knows exactly what to do for the good of the plant. And so the branches here are speaking of those who are in Christ. And what is the fruit? Like that's the question. Jesus, what is the fruit? What is the fruit that you're longing to see produce when we remain in you? And sometimes it is very tempting to think that the fruit equals good works. But if you were to go through John's gospel, I don't think John would recognize that. The fruit does not seem to equal good works, because the only commandment that Jesus gave to his disciples in John was to love one another. It's the only commandment that he gave. And so I am strongly suggesting that the fruit of those in Christ appears to be love. It feels like it goes on to say that those who do not love are deemed as dead branches. And so that's why the pruning is so important. At times it's really difficult. At times the pruning can be really difficult, but it is necessary, and it reminds us, I think from John 15, it reminds us that fruit can only be produced by those who remain in Jesus. And the great thing is that we are not expected to love by ourselves. Sometimes you maybe feel the pressure of that. Or you're sitting there now, you're thinking of certain people in your family or in your community, and like, I don't know how I can do that by myself. You're not expected to, and I don't think you can. But there's something about the pruning, there's something about remaining in the vine, that we remain in Jesus. When we remain in him, we partake of the love that exists eternally, the depth of love that exists eternally between Father and Son. That's why Paul's letter to the Ephesians is one of my favorites. Ephesians 3 verse 17. I know people will want me to go on. Dad will want me to go on to 20 and 21. But verse 17 says that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, as you're being rooted and grounded in love. And so remaining in the source of love, we learn to love as he loves. And I think we produce the fruit of love in everything that we do. So the guys have one more song, just as we reflect, just as we pause for a minute before we focus our minds on kids and dinner and all that we're going to do today. But 1 John verse 4 says, Beloved, since God loved you so much, we also ought to love one another. And so I think hopefully there's some challenge for us, there's something for us to wrestle through just in a moment of reflection, to pause, whether it's in the words that we've used, whether it's how well we love people, whether it's in what we need to do in order to be pruned, in order to be fruitful, in order to love. There's challenge there for me, and I hopefully there's challenge there for us. As the guys come and lead us in one last song, let's take time to prayerfully reflect on that.